All right, guys. So there's some very fascinating things that are happening in politics, particularly in the GOP. Okay. Obviously, there's a GOP civil war between the establishment Republicans and Trump supporting Republicans. But I think that there is another political battle that's on the horizon. Really, I mean, is already here, in which conservatives that don't particularly care as much about the whole principle of limited government when it comes to using government power to protect our constitutional rights, such as freedom of speech, are probably going to find themselves at odds with the more libertarian, laissez-faire, free market libertarians, right? And guys, there's a little bit of some history behind this stuff, because the whole laissez-faire libertarian ideology in the Republican Party came in the 1950s through the founding of the National Review, and then it really picked up steam under Ronald Reagan. And now, libertarians and conservatives have enjoyed this marriage of coming together to oppose the Democrats using the principles of limited government. Now, the issue is that because the world is evolving and the world is changing, this idea of limited government, particularly when it comes to conservatives, doesn't seem as appealing of an idea as it used to be, because now you have big tech companies who have become so big that they become like a shadow government in and of themselves, censoring conservatives. And this is just not with big tech, right? There's also companies that are considering implementing policies, for example, like having to provide proof of vaccination before entering a business or going to a game or participating in some type of recreational event. And conservatives feel like this is a violation of our rights and freedoms. And Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida has been at the forefront of pushing back against this, okay? And this is kind of upset libertarians on the right, because libertarians are seeing this as authoritarianism. They're seeing Ron DeSantis as somebody that is wielding big government power to regulate small business, which is against the principle of limited government. So there's an interesting dichotomy that is forming between conservatives who really care about maintaining their foundational rights and libertarians who don't want to regulate private businesses, right? They don't want the government to overstep their boundaries. And like I said, guys, Ron DeSantis has really stepped up to the plate for the conservative movement in terms of trying to protect the foundational rights they care about. But again, libertarians are seeing this as big government overreach. And this newest law that it looks like Ron DeSantis is going to sign, banning social media companies from deplatforming politicians, is probably going to muddy the waters even more. So let's read more about what Ron DeSantis and the Florida politicians are trying to do in order to punish censorship from big tech. Social media companies would be unable to permanently kick people off their platforms under a tough new Florida law. The bill passed by the GOP-dominated state legislature Thursday and awaiting Governor Ron DeSantis' signature would make it a crime to remove state political candidates from Twitter and Facebook, and would mete out penalties of $250,000 a day for any statewide candidate who is deplatformed. Removing more local candidates would cost the company $250,000 a day. The bill also requires tech companies to give users 7 days notice that they are at risk of being banned and offer them the opportunity to correct the issue. Suspensions of up to 14 days would still be allowed. Quote, "What this bill is about is sending a loud message to Silicon Valley that they are not the arbiters of truth," GOP state representative John Snyder said Wednesday. NBC News reported, "What this bill does is send a loud message that the Constitution does not have an asterisk that says only certain speech is free and protected." Big tech advocacy groups have struck back, saying the law would violate their First Amendment right to decide who can participate on their platforms. Quote, "This bill abandons conservative values, violates the First Amendment, and would force websites to host anti-Semitic, racist, and hateful content," Carl Sasbo, vice president of trade group Net Choice, told USA Today. "Content moderation is crucial to an internet that is safe and valuable for families and Floridian small businesses, but this bill would undermine this important ecosystem. Now, it is unclear whether or not this bill would be retroactive in the sense that it would fine Twitter and Facebook for kicking off President Trump. Okay, but here's my opinion on this, guys. I look at the world from a very practical perspective, right? In my type of conservatism, I tend to lean more towards Burkean conservatism. I'm talking about the godfather of the conservative movement, Edmund Burke, right? So I try to see things kind of through the way that I think he would see things, right? And I think one of the things that Edmund Burke said that really stuck with me is the world is changing, right? And because the world changed, you need to have the power to adjust to change in order to conserve. More specifically, the quote goes like this: a state without the means of some change is without the means of its own conservation. Okay? And that's the way I kind of see some of these laws that the Florida government is passing, right? Specifically in regards to big tech. I know a lot of people are taking issue with this because they're saying, okay, this is government overreach. But like I said, man, even when it came to the transgender issue, when it comes to kids, conservatives have always been limited government, but they've never been no government, right? And this idea that government has to stay out of everything, it's just not realistic, and it's also not practical, okay? This is why we have publicly funded services like, police and military and things of that nature, because in very limited cases, the government is better at providing goods and services than the private sector. Now, again, like I said, that's very limited cases. But I think in this situation, what you have is the government effectively protecting freedom of speech. Because again, big private companies like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, they've all become so big that they're effectively public forums, right? And now these public forums that are being run by these private institutions are blocking political candidates from being able to get on the platform, which is essentially blocking speech, right? That's what it is from a practical perspective. And a lot of people want to make the argument, well, you could just go get on another platform, right? Like, they're not really blocking your speech. You're free to get on other platforms. However, we've seen that these big tech companies are working in conglomeration with each other, right? For example, you saw at Parler, okay? You saw how the Apple Store, the Google Play Store, Amazon, they all work together in order to basically try to wipe Parler from the internet. That's what they did. And when they're all working together and they seem to have a certain political ideology, that to me is dangerous. At that point, they've effectively become more powerful than the government, in my opinion. And I think it's important that, the government does not let these big private institutions become big enough to infringe on people's rights. Also, again, that's the argument you made, that these private companies are taking advantage of Section 230, right? Where, they are getting the benefits of being a platform while acting as publishers, which again, some people argue is abuse of Section 230. But at the end of the day, I do agree with the libertarian argument to a certain extent that we should definitely be wary about this stuff, right? Ron DeSantis shouldn't just get a free pass to do this type of stuff just when he wants and how he wants. Okay, we should be wary of it, but I don't necessarily disagree with him trying to protect our foundational rights, right? Using the government in order to rein these big companies in, because these big companies, again, they have their own agenda outside of the government that might not necessarily be good for the people. So I subscribe to both arguments here, right? But I will say this. This is something that I expect the GOP to move forward with in the future in terms of using the government in order to exercise more control over private industry, because they're just going to have to, right? You saw with MLB, you see with all these woke corporations and big tech, all this stuff, you see what's happening. They're against conservatives. And in order to actually save the GOP, to save the Republican Party, to preserve the Republican Party, they're going to have to move forward with some legislation to try to rein this stuff in. For example, you saw Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz coming out with bills to bust up big tech. You see Ted Cruz right now, he's going on a crusade against big corporations, talking about how he's not taking any more corporate PAC money. You also got the most conservative judge on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, coming out talking about how big tech and social media companies should be regulated like public utilities. Now, obviously, I don't agree with that much government overreach for a situation like this, but I feel like that's the direction that the GOP is going to move in, because they're going to have to a certain extent, especially the Trump wing of the Republican Party. They're going to have to move in that direction. Okay, so I would expect to see more in this, and this is why I say, you know, there may be a breakup or a temporary divorce between libertarians and conservatives, particularly those that are, you know, more Trump-oriented conservatives in the party. I just wouldn't be surprised to see that happen, and with more stuff like this happening in the future, I do expect that it's to be a lot more kind of division among the two. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.